Raw faith. Raw faith. Been in this series. We're going to close it out today. Raw faith. We started with untamed faith. I showed you a picture of a lion and has all the potential and all the power and everything that could be put in a lion. He has it. He has every aspect to be what he's designed to be, but he can't because from birth he literally has been taken care of. He lives in the wild, but he's been fed, and he can't be what he could be because he's relied on somebody else to do it for him. And God hasn't called us to a faith like that. He's called us to engage in the potential that he's placed in us. And then the next week Heather spoke on unleashed faith, and that idea that sometimes in our life, in this faith journey that we have, it's easy to get our eyes on the storm. It's easy to get our eyes on the circumstance. But the Spirit of God, that same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead, is available to us. Jelena told us that during worship, is available to us to unleash our faith. To unleash our faith. And it's raw sometimes. And then we talked about the aspect of unrestrained faith, that God didn't call us to be bound. He called us to be unrestrained in our faith. To not go, God, I'll do this, but I won't do that. At his word, we say yes. At his word, we simply obey. And then we talked about uncharted faith last week, and it prepares us to trust God regardless of what unfolds on the journey, regardless of what we think the outcome may be or not be. We trust him no matter what, and this is all part of raw faith. And today we're talking about this idea of undivided faith. Because truly, you can have all these other areas in place. You can have the understanding of this, but if you're divided in your faith, oh, that'll mess you up. How many understand that sometimes it's easy to have faith in certain areas of our life? Oh yeah, I have no problem with that. Sometimes that comes like this. I have no problem praying for somebody else. I believe God will come through for them. I know God can forgive them. I know God can heal them. But just my life, I'm just, these things I've done, I just don't know how God could forgive me. I just don't know how God could, for them, it's okay, but for me, I just struggle in that. That's divided faith, and God hasn't called us to that. He's called us to undivided faith. The same God that's on the throne here is the same God that's on the throne here. The same God that you cry out to and don't have a problem for somebody else is the same God that loves you anyway, amen? That's undivided faith. Undivided faith. Today we look at undivided faith. Undivided faith establishes faith that is consistent at the heart level. The key word there is consistent. It doesn't waver back and forth. It's consistent. God, I believe you for this. And Lord, I believe you for that. God, I'm undivided, but it's at the heart level. It's at the heart level. It does not separate the things where we're good or bad, difficult or not difficult. Let me give you the definition of the word undivided. Undivided is it's a singular devotion. It's not parted. It's a concentrated effort. It's not separated by conflict or opinion. If you take the concept of the word faith and you insert it into this definition, faith as undivided is a singular devotion. It's not parted. It's a concentrated effort, not separated by conflict or opinion. I want to give you the two scriptures we've been pivoting on in this series is Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction or the evidence of things not seen. And then Hebrews 11:6 says, and without faith, it is impossible to please God. It's not like you're going to be a follower of Christ and not have faith. You will not please God. It does not work out. You can't have faith in context. You can't have faith here and no faith here. Whatever the difference is in those, it has to be undivided faith. Without faith, it is impossible to please him, for whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. Listen to me, church. There is blessing to following God. There is reward to following God. It's not like he says, come follow me and you get nothing. He says, come follow me, you get everything. And the same Lord that promises that here and those things that you can get your heart and your mind around is the same God that'll be here for you in those difficult times when you're going, God, I just don't know. I just don't understand. I can't see how this is going to play. I can't see how this is going to, why did this happen? And all. The same God is the same God, undivided faith. Lord, no matter what, I place it in your hands. Lord, I need your heart. I need that understanding that you have from your word, Lord God. Get your word into my heart. God, get your word that it comes from my mouth. It changes my perspective. Undivided faith is what we're looking at. We must realize the call of Jesus is one that has a demand for action. Jesus doesn't just say, come follow me, and expects you to just consider it and walk away or do nothing with it. When Jesus started his ministry, he started it with a simple call, come follow me. That same call is ringing out to his church today and is ringing to you and to me, come follow me. That's what he says, come follow me. Because these times, yeah, you need faith in these times, but these times you need faith in these times. And the same faith here is the same faith here because I'm the same God. I'm the same one who sits on the throne. The God of the weekend that we celebrate and we praise is the same God Monday morning, amen? He has the same authority on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday at the end of the week. The same God of the weekend is the same God during the weekday. In the military, there's maneuvers. One of the effective tactical operations that military will use is called divide and conquer. Divide and conquer. The enemy of our soul, the devil, he does the same thing. If he can get us to be divided in our faith, he can conquer our whole being. He's okay with you going, oh, I trust the Lord in this area of my life. This area for others, this area for ministry. I trust the Lord here. But what about here? Well, I just struggle and I choose to be anxious and worried and angry and unforgiving. And I'm just gonna live my life. I'm just gonna choose. If the enemy could get you to divide your faith like that, he can divide and conquer. And it's not just in the area of faith, it's your whole life. So it's imperative that we understand this. If you go back in history, we may have some history buffs here this morning. History you can learn from. History tends to repeat itself. History reveals a lot of things of how things went down good and bad. And you can go into church history and you can read about the revivals, and it's exciting to see what God had done, not just through the scriptures, but also in times where there was great outpourings of the Spirit all through history. And some of the history of the church is kind of dark. Some of the history of the church is kind of, it's lost its meaning, its purpose, its vision for what it's to be about. In the 11th and 14th centuries, there was these little things called the Crusades. And the Crusades had a well-meaning or well-intentions, but they did some crazy stuff in the name of God. At some points you would see in history, they would come across a pagan people, a pagan nation, people that were ungodly, and they would round them up and they would get them to say a sinner's prayer. And they would get them to pray this certain prayer, and then they'd kill them. That's not real good evangelism. They'd lost the meaning of what it was to show the love of Christ to a world, a lost world. Erwin McManus, he tells a story in his book, The Barbarian Way. I told you about this a couple weeks ago. A lot of this series is the ideas come from that book, The Barbarian Way. I encourage you to read that. And he reveals an illustration that occurred during these crusades, and it presents a positive picture of what it means to not only belong to the heart of God, but to fight for the heart of God, to fight for his heart in your heart. And he tells a story, and this name will be familiar to many of you. Robert the Bruce. He was a Scottish noble whose character is most remembered for betraying William Wallace in the movie Braveheart. And that movie is actually based on historical figures, historical people that truly lived. And of course, Hollywood intermingles into it. But the real story, the backstory on this, Robert the Bruce, he had betrayed William Wallace, who was played by Mel Gibson, and in that movie, and Mel Gibson, freedom, and all this, and the white or the blue face, But Robert the Bruce later rose up to lead Scotland to freedom after Wallace's execution. He actually rose up and he did the right thing, and he led his country. And Robert the Bruce, he died in 1329 at the age of 54, which was actually quite elderly at that time. And shortly before his death, Robert the Bruce requested that his heart be removed from his body and taken on crusade by a worthy knight. You know, that's kind of edgy. James Douglas was one of his closest friends and was at his bedside and took on that responsibility. And the heart of Robert the Bruce was embalmed and placed in a small container that Douglas carried around his neck. And in every battle that Douglas fought, he literally carried the heart of his king pressed against his chest. And I just think that's an amazing picture, because it kept in the forefront why they were fighting, who they were fighting for, and it was just an amazing picture. And in the early spring of 1330, Douglas sailed from Scotland to Grenada, Spain, and engaged in a campaign against the Moors, which were an Islamic people. And in an ill-fated battle, Douglas found himself surrounded, and in this situation, death was both certain and imminent. And in that moment, Douglas reached for the heart strapped around his neck, and he flung it in the enemy's midst and cried out, "Fight for the heart of your king!" And one historian quotes Douglas as shouting, "Forward, brave heart, as ever thou would want to do, and Douglas will follow his king's heart or die." So some of the elements of the movie all intermix into history. The motto of the Douglas clan, to which the present Duke belongs, is even this day simply forward. That's their motto, forward. And fighting for the heart of the king. It's not that Christians need to fight for the heart of God, as in you're going to protect God. Can I tell you, you and I can't protect God. God can handle himself. God can take care of matters if he needs to. It's not like God's going, "I just need my people to protect me. I just need my people." No, that's not what I mean by fighting for the heart of your king. Sometimes I get in a situation and it's easy, for lack of a better way to put it, it's easy to have faith. I'll just trust God. You know what? We'll just trust God on this. But other times, there's times it's not so easy, because I'm not sure how this is going to play out. Matter of fact, I'm liking how I think. I'm not liking how I think it's going to play out. God, I really don't have answers for this. Lord, did that one get by you? God, I just don't. And it's at those times I have to fight for the heart of the king. I have to fight to have the heart of God in place here. When that person hurts me, when I'm offended, when guilt and shame have come in, and it's easier to pray for somebody else to have the blessings of God. When I think I'm null and void, that's when I got to fight for the heart of the king. That's when you have to fight for the heart of the king. Undivided faith. I've seen some people, I love to be around Christians that are new Christians. Man, they're raw. They just take God at his word. I think that's pretty cool, huh? A lot of people, they grow old in God. It's not that their age is necessarily old, but everything's just kind of become familiar. But new Christians, man, they're a different breed. I see people, they come to Jesus, they immediately embrace the heart of the king. I don't care what God calls me to do, I'm going to do it. I don't care who I need to part ways with. If they don't like it, you know what? I'm just following the heart of my king. They may not understand. They may think I'm crazy, but I just love the God that the story reveals what he's done for me. And what I was, he still loves me. And what I am, he still loves me. He loves me beyond me. And he's got a plan for my life, and I love him no matter what. I mean, those kind of people, man, they're fun to be around. They live their lives with every step moving forward, and with every fiber of their being fighting for the heart of their king, Jesus Christ. He provides this all-consuming passion for their lives. They're not about religion or position. They have little patience for institution or bureaucracy or even religion. They're not into what I need to do to reach God. They just keep focusing on what God did to reach them. And sometimes when they're asked if they're a Christian, they may say no. And they say, "No, I'm just a passionate follower of Christ." The world views Christianity oftentimes, depending on the realms that you're in, just as another world religious system, no different than Buddhism or Hinduism or Islam or whatever ism. Listen, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, then you're called to fight for the heart of your king. You can't just live here and then all of a sudden switch over here and God's on the throne and I'm not sure if God's who he says God's, you know what, I know God's good for you, but I just don't know if God's good for you. You can't do that if you're a follower of Christ. You say, God's enough. God is enough for me. No matter what, he's enough. And you fight for the heart of your king. Proverbs 3:1-4 says, my son, do not forget my teaching. In context, my daughter, my son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. Let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck and write them on the tablet of your heart so that you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. Secondly, to have an undivided faith means your faith is not dictated by the difficulty of the journey. Church, that's huge. That your undivided faith is saying, no, I don't care how difficult the journey is. I don't care how hard this is right now. My faith is unchanged. It's undivided. The same God where it's easy to pray these things is the same God that I can pray these hard things. I can pray and I can fight for his heart, regardless of what the journey is that I'm on right now. Regardless of the situation. One of the tragedies I see today is there's an overwhelming number of people who declare Jesus as Lord, but their faith is divided. They're divided between these two things. The enemy, you've played into his tactics. He has divided and he's conquering. Well, I could pray over their marriage, but mine's falling apart. And so, it just is what it is. No. Undivided faith says, you know what? I'm going to fight for the heart of my king. My heart. I'm going to do what I can do. You can't change anybody else, but you can do what you can do. And God will bless you through that. The Apostle John, in speaking to the church in Ephesus in the book of Revelation, it's a prophetic book. The church in Ephesus had been doing all these good things. They had been, and it was noticeable. And it was recognized by God himself. The message goes, Revelation 2:1-4, to the angel of the church in Ephesus write, the words of him who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and walks among the 7 golden lampstands. He says, I know your works, your toil and your patient endurance, and how you cannot bear with those who are evil, but have tested those who call themselves apostles and are not, and found them to be false. He says, I know you are enduring patiently and bearing up for my name's sake, and you have not grown weary, but I have this against you, that you have abandoned the love you had at first. You've abandoned the love you've had at first. There's a lot of people, they're walking along and somehow they define their walk with God as something that happened way back when. I remember when, and the golden years of your walk with God is sometime in the past, but some here in the present, you just quit fighting for the heart of your king. You just decided, well, I'm just going to kind of coast. I'm just going to kind of go on autopilot. I'm just going to kind of take it as it comes, whatever. I don't know. And it's grown cold. The church in Ephesus had done all these great things. And God said, that's great. Patient, endurance. You've toiled. But you've forgotten your first love. You got to fight for that. You got to do something about that. You know what God commanded Israel? This is his people, his chosen people. Back in the Old Testament, to establish that foundation for them, because he's going to use them to show the world what he could do through a people that's fully devoted to him. That's the purpose here. And in Deuteronomy 6:5-6, the Lord declares, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. Will control everything about you. Well, Lord, I'll serve you with with all my soul, but, when it comes down to it, I'm not really into putting a whole lot of effort. I'll receive what you have for me, but quietly I'll live it. When Jesus was asked, Mark 12, 28 through 31, he refers back to this scripture, but he's asked a question. One of the scribes came up. He heard a dispute going on, and seeing how Jesus answered them well, he asked him, "Which commandment is the most important of all?" And Jesus answered, "The most important is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart." He's referring back to Deuteronomy. "And with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." He takes these two commandments and he levels them. Love the Lord your God with all your soul, your might, your strength, everything about you. And love your neighbor as yourself. What he's saying is, you can't be divided in this. It has to be undivided. You can't say, "I love God, but I hate people." You've heard me say this. Ministry would be easy if it weren't for people. But it'd be impossible. It's impossible without faith to please God. It's impossible to serve God without serving people. It's impossible. I love the Lord with all my soul, with all my heart, with all my strength. But I don't give a rip about people. I'm done with people. I'm just going to stay at home and read my Bible. Yeah, the enemy got you. He has divided you. And that faith is faulty, and that faith is not pleasing to God. We have to have an undivided faith. Church, it's raw. People are raw. That's why he provides the opportunity to lean into him. Thirdly, to have undivided faith is to have the heart of your king. The heart of your king is towards people. The heart of your king is towards you. The heart of the king is to use you, to empower you, to use your life, to bring life to others. Love, intimacy, passion, sacrifice will mark the follower of Christ who will stand as a disciple of Christ. People are walking around outside, inside the church, simply on autopilot. They have no vision for the future. They worry over things that truly don't matter or even don't exist. I've talked with people that they're so worried about something that may happen to the detriment of their faith itself. And then when you play it back, months later, weeks, months, years later, it never even happened. So much energy was spent on something that didn't exist. And all the while, your faith was divided. God, I know you can do this, but I just don't know. I just don't know if you're going to do this. And we stop right there. Here's the thing. If it's the Lord's will, you want the Lord's will. Well, I don't like it. That's a whole other issue. That's a whole issue of trust. See, God loves you beyond you. God loves you beyond what you can think and imagine. God's got a plan for your life. Each and every person here, that plan is so powerful that it needs empowered by His Spirit. That same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead is available to you and I. That same Spirit that has resurrection power. If you're here this morning and there's some things that just seem dead in your life, that same power is available to you. Amen? There are people who get it. There's people. This is what's on. There's people in this church. They get it. There's people outside of this church. They get it. They have an undivided faith that they're passionate for the heart of their King. They're being raised up in the church to reach this world for Jesus. We got young people. We got young people that, man, they want to see God do something. It's not that they're tired of hearing what He did. They're ready to see Him do it again. They're not just content with talking about what God can do. They're into what God is doing and what He's going to do through them. That's a hunger, and that's a faith that's undivided. Their words ignite those who seek life in Christ. Their words challenge those who stop growing in their faith. I want to close with this. We have before us this morning communion. I want to invite the ushers to come to help serve this. I can't think of a better illustration of what it is to have undivided faith in a difficult situation. I mean, you think of Christ, 100% man, 100% God. God incarnate comes to earth. The only way, mankind, the only way we can receive salvation. He is the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. And here he is. It's amping up. The crucifixion is about to happen. He's going through such agony. And he looks out across the crowd and he sees those that one day loved him and then the next day hate him. That one day are for him and the next day they're against him. Some of them are really close to him, literally just a few hours before the crucifixion. A few hours before, Peter is willing to give his life. He pulls a sword. He cuts a guy's ear off when they're coming at Jesus. I mean, he's a fighter. And Jesus is like, no, you can't do that. Picks the ear up, sticks it back on. Go read the story. Literally the next day, this same guy who's willing to give his life, by faith, you're going, man, that's some intense faith. That's the kind of faith I want. Just to live for God no matter what. The same guy the next day denies Jesus not once, but 3 times, fulfilling the prophecy that Jesus told him in the rooster crows. The same guy that's willing to lay it all down here is faltering here. The same guy that's physically going forward is spiritually laying it all down. Undivided faith is what God's called us to. And he's an example. Peter is the example of divided faith. Jesus is on the cross and he's looking at a people and he's looking into the future. He's seeing your life and my life and he's going, this is the only way. And the Bible says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. You say, I really struggle with receiving what Christ has. I know he can do this for others, but I just really struggle with him forgiving me. No, you struggle with you forgiving you. You say, yeah, that's where I struggle. I struggle with me forgiving me. I know how I've been. I know how I am. If you live in that zone, your faith is going to be divided. You're always going to struggle. And truly, that attitude puts you above God's grace. God, I know your grace is this. I know your grace is sufficient for these, but not for me. And you put yourself above him. Can't do that. Your best day isn't good enough. My best day isn't good enough. Listen, church, he loves us anyway. And he loves us enough that he doesn't just leave us like we are. He doesn't just say, oh, you're forgiven, you're covered. Now go do what you want. No, he loves us too much. We'd never do that to a kid. Why would God ever do that to us? What we have before us is communion, and it's a remembrance. As long as we partake of this, we do this in remembrance of him, and we proclaim the Lord's death until he comes again. That's the assurance of hope. Amen. He's coming again. This isn't it. Amen. But he's not done with you. If you're here, if you're hearing this, if you're breathing and you have life, I don't care what your quality of life is. He's not done with you yet. You still have an opportunity to say yes. You still have an opportunity to say, God, I'm following you. Undivided faith. You're on the throne. Whether it's this situation or this situation, Lord, I'm following you no matter what.